I'm a 32-year-old guy who generally considers himself pretty laid back, but even the most easygoing people have their limits. I have a stable job, pay my bills, and mostly keep to myself. For the past 2 years, I've been in a relationship with my girlfriend. Let's call her G. While things weren't perfect between us, they were good enough for me to start imagining a future together. A few months ago, G began talking about wanting a proper vacation. Something more than just a quick road trip. Cancun seemed like the perfect destination. Sunny beaches, relaxation, and a chance to unwind. It felt like exactly what we needed. We flew out on a Friday morning, and from the start, G was unusually cheerful, almost giddy. At the time, I chalked it up to excitement, but looking back, there were subtle red flags I ignored. For example, she was glued to her phone during the entire flight, tilting the screen away whenever I glanced over. I teased her about it. What's so important that you can't unplug for a couple of hours? She brushed it off casually, just work stuff. By the time we landed, I convinced myself I was overthinking. The first 2 days went smoothly. We lounged by the pool, explored local restaurants, and took plenty of silly photos, just like any normal couple on vacation. But by the third day, something shifted. G kept stepping away to take work calls. For someone who had insisted on unplugging and relaxing, it felt strange. That afternoon, she turned to me and said, "I'm going to check out some shops down the street. Wanna come?" I was stretched out on a lounge chair, cocktail in hand, feeling lazy. "Nah, I'm good. Bring me back something fun," I replied. She smiled, but it wasn't her usual warm, genuine smile. It felt forced, almost as if she was relieved I declined. As she walked away, something about her energy gnawed at me. I'm not usually the jealous or suspicious type, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Acting on instinct, I waited about 10 minutes before heading toward the shops to follow her. It didn't take long to spot her. She was sitting at a small coffee shop, but she wasn't alone. Across from her sat a man I instantly recognized, her ex. They were laughing together, sharing what looked like a private joke. Let me pause for context. G had a long, messy history with this guy. They'd been on and off for years before we met, and she swore to me it was over. She even showed me texts where she told him to leave her alone. Seeing them together now felt like a punch to the gut. I didn't confront her right then and there. I wasn't ready to cause a scene. Instead, I stayed in the background, discreetly snapping a few photos with my phone. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to stay calm and observe. I followed them at a distance as they left a coffee shop and strolled to a nearby park. They looked far too comfortable, laughing, chatting, and at one point, she even hugged him. Eventually, they parted ways, and G returned to the hotel. She came back all smiles. The shops were great. "I got you this," she said, handing me a cheesy souvenir keychain. "Thanks," I replied, forcing a smile. "Looks like you had fun." "Yeah, it was nice to get out for a bit," she said, without a flicker of guilt on her face. That night, while she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone. I know it was a breach of trust, but at that point, I needed answers. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Their text messages revealed they had been planning this for weeks. The vacation wasn't just about us. It was a cover for her to meet him. She told him she missed him, that she still thought about him, and that she needed closure. Closure? Really? I barely slept that night. By morning, I had a plan. I acted like everything was fine. We went snorkeling, had lunch, and even walked along the beach at sunset. All the while, I was mentally preparing my next move. That evening, I told her I wasn't feeling well and wanted to stay in. She seemed disappointed but didn't push. "I might head out for a bit," she said casually. "Sure," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. As soon as she left, I sprang into action. I packed my bags, called the airline, and booked the next available flight home. Then I went to the front desk and canceled our room, citing an emergency. By the time she returned to the hotel around midnight, I was gone. I left her a note. Gee, I know about your little reunion with his name. Hope it was worth it. The room is canceled, and I'm on a flight back home. Good luck sorting this out. Was it harsh? Maybe. But she deserved it. As the plane took off, I leaned back in my seat, feeling a strange mix of anger, sadness, and relief. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is walk away, but in that moment, I knew it was the right choice. As I replayed the last 2 years in my head, I couldn't help but feel like a fool. The red flags had been there all along. The secretive texts, the flimsy excuses, and the way she always downplayed her history with her ex. I had ignored them, wanting to believe in her and in us. But now, in the aftermath of Cancun, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. When my plane landed, I made a decision. I blocked her on everything: phone, social media, email. I didn't want to hear her excuses or apologies. She had shown me who she really was, and I wasn't about to give her another chance to hurt me. A few days later, the fallout began. Mutual friends started reaching out, saying G was in tears, claiming I had abandoned her in Mexico. She didn't tell you why. I asked one of them. No, they replied. She just said you freaked out and left. I sighed, realizing she was already spinning her narrative. Without hesitation, I sent the friend the screenshots and photos I had taken, the texts, the pictures of her with her ex, and the undeniable evidence of her lies. That shut down any defenses they had for her. The fallout for G was swift and brutal. She had to book a last-minute flight home, which cost her a small fortune. Her ex, upon hearing what had happened, ghosted her entirely. And as the truth spread among our friends, they began pulling away. It became clear to everyone that G wasn't a victim. She was the architect of her own downfall. As for me, I was doing better than I had in years. Ending that relationship was the smartest decision I'd ever made. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. If there's one thing I took away from all of this, it's that you should always trust your instincts and never let someone take advantage of you. But G wasn't the type to let things go quietly. About a week after I got home, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. It didn't take long to figure out it was from her. The email was a disaster. Rambling apologies, flimsy excuses, and outright fabrications. She claimed that meeting her ex had been a spur-of-the-moment decision and insisted that I'd misunderstood everything. Misunderstood? I had photos. I had texts. What exactly was there to misunderstand? I ignored the email. A few days later, one of her friends called me. We'd always been on good terms, so I was willing to hear them out until they said, "You really hurt her." Hurt hers. I replied, incredulous. "Do you even know what she did?" She said she met her ex, but it wasn't what you think. She just wanted to clear the air. Clear the air? I repeated, sarcasm dripping from my voice. Because sneaking around and hugging him screams honesty, right? I forwarded the friend the same screenshots I'd shown others. That was the end of that conversation. I thought that would be the last of it, but G wasn't finished. She started spinning a new story, painting herself as the victim. According to her, I was controlling, paranoid, and had ruined the vacation with my jealous rage. She even accused me of stealing her belongings when I left, which was laughable, considering I barely had time to pack my own things. Her lies soon found their way to social media. She portrayed me as unstable and emotionally abusive. At first, I didn't care. Her stories were so outrageous, they didn't deserve my attention. But then, she crossed a line I couldn't ignore. One morning, I woke up to a text from my boss asking me to call immediately. Confused, I did as he asked. "We got an email," he said, sounding uneasy. "Someone's claiming you've been acting erratically and might pose a danger to the team." "What?" I asked, stunned. It included screenshots of texts where you supposedly admitted to being unstable. The email hit me like a punch to the gut. None of it was true. When I saw the email, my stomach turned. G had created fake screenshots to make it look like I was ranting and making threats. The forgeries were sloppy, full of typos and odd formatting, but it was disturbing nonetheless. Thankfully, my boss and HR dismissed it as a hoax, but the damage was done. My reputation had taken a hit, and I knew exactly who was responsible. That was the last straw. If G wanted a fight, she had picked the wrong person. I consulted a lawyer and laid out everything. Her lies, the fake screenshots, and her attempt to jeopardize my job. The lawyer recommended sending her a cease and desist letter, which I had delivered by a process server. The letter was clear and firm. If she didn't stop her harassment, I would pursue legal action for defamation. Her reaction was predictable. She texted me from a new number, ranting in all caps about how I was overreacting and ruining her life. "You're doing that yourself," I replied, before blocking her again. Then I got strategic. G had always been too open on social media, and it didn't take long to find posts and comments that showed her true colors. She had bragged about manipulating people, flaking on commitments, and even sabotaging other relationships. I saved everything, not to use against her immediately, but as a precaution in case she escalated further. And escalate she did. When she realized the legal threat was serious, she doubled down on her lies, trying to turn more mutual friends against me. She claimed the cease and desist letter was an attempt to silence her, but most of our friends were already on my side. They had seen the evidence. The backlash hit her hard. People started confronting her publicly, questioning her lies. Some unfollowed her online, while others cut her off completely. The final blow came from her ex. He had no idea she was in a relationship when they met up in Cancun. When he found out, he posted a scathing rant online, calling her a manipulative liar and warning others to steer clear of her. It was brutal and well-deserved. By the time the dust settled, G's reputation was in tatters. She deleted all her social media accounts and, from what I heard, moved to another city. By then, I was done caring. Revenge isn't always the answer, but sometimes exposing the truth is. She tried to destroy my life, and all I did was let people see who she really was. Looking back, I'm grateful for everything that happened. It taught me to trust my instincts, stand up for myself, and never settle for someone who doesn't respect me.